Welcome to today's session. So today's all about teaching you how to teach your kids to train your dog. So today I'm going to be sharing some simple tips and tricks to how to teach your kids to train their dog. My name is Pamela Brown. I'm a professional dog trainer, and I make your life living with dogs a lot easier. And again, today we'll be sharing some simple tricks to teach your kids to train their dogs. Because as we know, teaching your kids to train their dogs, it can be a rewarding experience for both your kid and the dog. But of course, you're probably sitting here thinking, all right, well, when you get the kids and the dogs together, it can get a little bit crazy. So there's actual way to make training fun and easy for your kids and keep everything up and up. So I want to jump into some of those tips so you can teach your kids how to train the dog so you can go off and do other things. All right. So let's just jump right into it. And as always, if you have a question, just drop them in the comments. I like to make this a little bit interactive. So any questions, just pop them there. So first and foremost, when we're talking about teaching your kids to train your dog, you want to think about safety first. So you want to start by teaching your kids how to approach and handle dogs safely. So your kids should understand the importance of respecting the dog's personal space. And I talk a lot about this when I go into the homes working with family, especially with young kids, kids respecting their personal space. So what that means is you want to talk to your kids about, hey, if the dog's sleeping, you want to allow the dog to sleep, just like you don't like us to bother you when you're sleeping. Likewise, if the dog is eating, you don't want to go over there and start messing with the dog, pulling on the tail, petting the dog, because once again, you want to explain to kids, how would you like if you were sitting there eating your favorite meal and then mommy or daddy or whoever just went over and reached into your meal. So you always want to talk about safety first before you even get into training a dog. Next up, so you want to start first and foremost teaching your kids about basic commands with dogs. Even if you're an adult or a child, you always start off with the basic commands. But one of the easier ones to teach your kids to train the dogs are sits, stays, and come. And you want to explain to your kid the importance of consistency and repetition is going to be key. And you want to demonstrate to them how to practice these commands. And if you're like, well, I don't even know how to teach sit or stay or come, if you go to Instagram, there's definitely reels and videos and things like that where you can also have handouts as well. Well, not handouts, in the captions, there's steps to teach your dog sit and stay and come. Those are fairly easy because sit, believe it or not, all it is doing a hand gesture like that over your dog's nose, and that forces them into the sit. And that's one that kids really like, because if you have the younger kids, they're always like, sit, sit, sit. And dogs, they learn by rewards. And so even though your kids are saying sit, sit, sit like that, it's very straightforward and it's very one tone. So I honestly don't mind the kids being a little bit bossy. I honestly make a joke when I'm training with the kids, like, this is your time to shine and be bossy. So you tell the, whatever Fido sit or whatever like that. So sit is an easy one to teach your kids. I'm going to get into a few more games later, but when we're talking about basic obedience command, sit's a good one. Positive reinforcement, again, emphasizing that by rewarding the pup good behavior and praising the dog's more likely to do that command, especially with the kid. And the best way to explain this to your children is to say, hey, remember, when you got an A on that test, or when I asked you to clean your room, or when I asked you to pick up your toys in the living room, mommy gave you that ice cream or popsicle. Wasn't that good? And you kind of did that. And we made a deal that if you do that all the time, then you'll get rewarded. You want to explain to your kids that way. You just don't want to explain like, hey, Fido over here, when you ask him to sit, you're going to give him a reward. The kids are like, yeah, all right, whatever. But you always want to explain to your kids in the context of which they understand, whether that's relating to a story, relating to game, school, or whatever, because then they get excited about it and they're more likely to train the dog. And when I work with kids, I'm all about, hey, especially when there's multiple kids in a home, I'm like, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, A, B, C. I get each and every one of them something to do with the pup or the dog, and I make it special to them. And I always like talking with the kids too, just to get a feel of what they like doing and kind of pairing that together. If they like watching TV, I'm like, okay, guess what? When you're watching TV, you're going to work on some sits and stays with the dogs. Remember, sits are fairly easy. So things like that. So just remember, when you're talking about positive reinforcement and working with the kids, you want to break it down so that they understand too. You're not making it boring horn for them because I am fun, Miss Pam. I tell you, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I don't know. I just love working with the kids. So next up, supervision and consistency. Of course, one of the main things I do hear about kids and dogs is just, parents trying to get things done, hearing the ooches and owls, oh, the dog bit me and stuff like that. But you always have to remember, until your dog and is kind of calm, especially with the puppies, and you have a good routine under your belt, because dogs do learn by routine, you want to just remember to teach your kids, for you to supervise your kids, while they're training the dogs. Just keep that in mind. Just don't want to say, oh, go over there and, do some sits. You want to be there to watch your kids and supervise, and making sure they're also doing the proper hand gestures and techniques. Next up, this goes back to what I was saying about when you're talking to your kids about teaching them to train the dog, to break it down in the context of which they understand. Kids are very creative. So you always, want to encourage, not one, I already said like 2 or 3 things, but encourage creativity. Kids come up with the most bizarre things. They actually help me come up with ideas to train a dog. I remember one time I went to this family's home, and the little kid was like, come here, Miss Pam, I got something in the back of the house. And she took me like deep in back of the woods and back of the house. And she had set up some type of like maze for the dog, which the dog could crawl under and stuff like that. She created all on her own, but that's something that they both could do together and bond between. So always, before you start throwing out ideas to your kids, see what imagination they have and what they can come up with that's creative and that they could do with the dog, because dogs learn by routine. Even if we didn't have to sit and stay, just your kids being creative and stuff like that will be good as well. Another thing about teaching your kids to train dogs is stress the importance of responsibility in dog training. So you want to explain to your kids, of course, again, breaking it down layman terms, that dogs need care, attention, and regular exercise. So you want to get the kids involved in feeding, walking the dogs, and creating some sense of responsibility, like I said, because that's going to strengthen the bond between them. So also another tip to teaching your kids to train the dog is meal times, right? And so instead of you getting the meals, if you're doing that already, have your kids do that. And one thing you do with dogs, especially jumping dogs with kids, is work on their impulse control. So you just have the kid hold the bowl up high like that and have the dog sit. And the bowl doesn't lower down until the dog stays sitting. And if the dog doesn't sit, the bowl goes back up again. And the kids love that because they think it's teasing the dog, but it's actually training the dog to not be so impulsive, and that in order for the food to reach the ground, they have to sit. And the next thing you know, you'll have a dog that's sitting for the bowl to come down a lot faster instead of being impulsive, jumping up. That's by far one of my favorite ones to teach kids to train the dogs, because for some reason, kids love teasing dogs. And when I say, guess what? You're going to get to tease the dog during this training session. They think it's so much fun. So definitely involve them into meal times when it comes down to training. So I promised you I was going to give you 2 more fun games and stuff for your kids to teach your dog. So I want to jump into that. Then we can wrap up on that. But one thing I love to teach the kids is teach your kids to play fetch with the dog, because that actually is in a nutshell, teaching your dog to come when called. And so what you want to do is, get your dog's favorite toy or whatever it may be, or a ball, and you're going to toss the ball far. It doesn't even matter if your dog doesn't bring it back, but you're going to load your kid up with some treats. And every single time the dog comes back, you're just going to give them a treat. Toss another ball, another toy. And then if your dog brings the ball back, great. You can reward them with a treat for dropping the ball or whatever it may be. But you're just going to keep on tossing the ball. Kids love that too, because the dog's coming back to them and the dog's not chasing the kids around the yard. They have some type of structured play to do. So fetch is always a good one to do, to teach your kids with the dogs. Another cool trick, because, fetch is really about recall, but I want to throw a trick in there. So teaching your kids to train your dog high five. That's always a cool one. And some kids, they figure it out on their own, but others, that's just a cool trick. And so what you want to do is hold a treat in your hand like that. You're going to wait till your dog kind of paws at your hand or raise the paw. And then you just grab the dog's hand, but then you can put the high five word to it. But then when you keep on doing that, like putting the treat in your hand, waiting for the dog to touch it or whatever like that, eventually you could turn that into like a high five like that, or you could turn it into a paw. Either way, it's like a cool trick. Dogs pick on that pretty easily. So actually have them practice that as well. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're encouraging positive behavior when your dog and between your dog and your kids, making sure they're both learning. You hear me? I said making sure they're both learning the commands. And then I have some parents say, well, yeah, my kid does need to learn how to sit too. But I mean, making sure that you're encouraging positive behavior between your dog and your kid and stuff like that, especially when your dog is learning the commands there. So that's all I have for today. I hope you have some good insight when it comes to teaching your kids to train dogs. Of course, if you have other questions, just drop them in the comments. I'm always around. You always can reach me if you talk to me through the chat and stuff like that, through Instagram or even Facebook. I'm always available to answer some questions quickly. But if you're driving along or if you're like a podcast person, always catch me on, Spotify, Stitcher, all those podcast platforms at Positive Dog Training Convos. Other than that, I will see you next week with another great topic. All right. Bye.